public comments now. We're going to start with in-person speakers. They will be called by the board secretary. Remote speakers will then precede those speakers. They will be admitted to the meeting by an HCPS staff member when it's their turn to speak. All speakers will receive 3 minutes to speak due to the number of registered speakers, unless they're representing an organization, and then they'll have 5 minutes. Speakers may be interrupted and be given notice when they have 30 seconds left. When speakers have reached their 3-minute mark, their time will expire. Just a little note here. Disparaging comments, personal attacks, and inflammatory remarks about specific schools, personnel, any person or group are not permitted. Speakers who engage in these comments will be reminded of the rules, and the board reserves the right to remove the speaker. In addition, public comment is an opportunity for members of the community to address the Board of Education. Please direct your comments to the board and not to other members of the public in the audience. So, Mrs. Rallo, I'd like to begin the in-person registered public speakers.
Yes. This evening we have a total of 22 in-person speakers. We will start off with Josie Cosgrove, followed by Cassandra Beverly.
Good evening. My name is Josie Cosgrove, and I'm a paraeducator in the STRIVE program at William S. James Elementary. The area of special education in Harford County Public Schools has many different layers and programs. Today, I'd like to provide you with some information about the STRIVE program. The STRIVE program is focused on offering highly specialized instruction to our youngest kindergarten students and to our 21-year-old adults. Its focus is to provide specialized services to individuals who have significant cognitive, communication, and behavior challenges. The educators in this program are legally mandated to participate in rigorous training, certifications, and ongoing professional development that exceeds that of a general or special education paraeducator. So why is all this additional training necessary? In addition to having communication and behavior challenges, many of our students have difficulty processing the senses around them. What this means in the classroom is that the lights might be too bright, too dim, a worker can be hammering outside, or the student's clothes or shoes may be too tight, too itchy, or they just don't like them. Shaky hand. Sorry. These are everyday occurrences that you and I experience every day and for the most part are able to ignore. However, these students can become fixated on these things and it can lead to severe anxiety, which may result in yelling, running, hitting themselves or others. Another common situation is created when an educator is working with a student on academics, communication, or social skills, and the student is having a difficult time understanding what is asked of him, her, or they just don't feel like doing the work. Many of them lack the skills to say, Mrs. Cosgrove, I don't get this, or Mrs. Cosgrove, I need a break. So what might they do? Run. They may run around the room screaming and knocking things off of shelves and hitting whoever or whatever may be in their way. And if your team isn't fast enough, out the door they go. Lastly, and the most common occurrence is when an adult is working with a student and the student gets frustrated. One may anticipate getting spit at, slapped in the face, punched, kicked, or have something thrown at them. Every STRIVE member that I have met has experienced this. And many of us, myself included, have also suffered concussions because of these behaviors. But probably worse than getting hit myself injured is helplessly watching a child intentionally injure himself by pulling at their hair, pounding their fist into their forehead, or slamming their head into their desk. Despite we as educators endure, we love what we do. We understand our students' individuality and special needs. Children in STRIVE, as well as all special education programs, deserve quality care and additional adult support and resources to meet their needs. As the conversation about revision and removal of services from the budget evolves, consider whether or not that action will affect the safety of all the students in the school system. Because although this only affects a small number of students, all students and adults are affected. Thank you.
Our next speaker is representing a group, so can you please give her 5 minutes? Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent Bolson, Board President Mueller and Vice President Sewell and members of the board. My name is Cassandra Beverly. I'm the current chair of the Harford County Caucus of African American Leaders. The caucus is a nonpartisan group of leaders from every segment of the Black community: clergy, business, educators, fraternal organizations, professionals, and others, whose mission it is to advocate for fairness, equity, and inclusion for African Americans in this county. I want to first express my gratitude for your service. As a former elected member of the board, I fully appreciate the commitment that you have made to improving the quality of our schools. Education is always one of the top priorities for the caucus. We understand the importance of a good education to create opportunities for success in life. My predecessor, Jim Thornton, myself, and other caucus members have appeared before the board to advocate for increased diversity in the hiring of administrators and classroom teachers. This county has historically lagged behind in the equitable treatment of people of color. In July of 1992, Joe Bond, who was then the Harford County president of the NAACP, wrote a letter to State Superintendent Nancy Grasmick, criticizing the hiring and promotion practices involving minority teachers. In 1998, Janice Grant, then Harford County president of the NAACP, commenting on 6 Black APs being promoted, raising the total number to 14, said, quote, "We are concerned that we don't see people of color in the policy and decision-making positions," unquote. I have no doubt that you will probably continue to hear from Harford, the current Harford County NAACP president. In 2018, there were 11 Black assistant principals when Superintendent Bolson made a decision that resulted in the demotion of 4 Black female assistant principals. Clearly a large step in the wrong direction. My predecessors and I appeared before the board to express our extreme dissatisfaction with that decision and have worked continuously seeking justice to have that wrong righted. Black students deserve to see people who look like them at every level of the school system and not solely amongst the custodial or lunch staff. We will be monitoring this issue and will hold HCPS accountable to improve its performance in this regard. School closings due to COVID have resulted in achievement losses for our students. There already existed an achievement gap between Black and white students. COVID has served to exacerbate this gap. Extraordinary effort and additional support services will be required to ensure that students are not lost. We know the significant negative impact for children of color who are not reading proficiently by 3rd grade. I encourage you to support a budget that provides for these vulnerable students to, in effect, deplete the oxygen from the school-to-prison pipeline. I'm asking you not to be influenced by voices of distraction that seek to have you devote your time to non-existent problems. Schools are for educating, not placating. You must not fear truth. Facts and not fiction must be taught. Truth must be taught even when it is uncomfortable. We would be doing our students a disservice if we choose to provide them with rose-colored glasses rather than helping them to develop critical thinking skills to navigate the world they will enter. We must know our history so that we can learn from it. Finally, I ask that all members of our community learn to disagree without being disagreeable. Please model the behavior that you want taught to our students. Our children are watching. Thank you, and I look forward to continuing this dialogue with you about these important issues. Good night.
Our next speakers are David Bauer, followed by Dr. Marla Tillman.
Good evening, everybody. So, I'm David Bauer. I emailed you all a preview of this, including links to sources. So, In the USA, we are currently dealing with a moral panic, maybe several connected moral panics. The Oxford reference defines a moral panic as, quote, a mass movement based on the false or exaggerated perception that some cultural behavior or group of people is dangerously deviant and poses a threat to society's values and interests, end quote. I've noted before that the demonization of critical race theory can be traced to a single person. He later moved on to attacking transgender rights. And just as we had a flood of legislation about banning critical race theory, we are currently seeing a flood of laws and bills targeting transgender people. Supporters of these attacks say they're protecting children and parental rights, but it's easy to see that that is false. Let's start with South Carolina House Bill 3730. This bill makes it a felony for medical professionals to perform or even just refer any person under the age of 26 for gender transition procedures. Under this bill, a physician in South Carolina could be imprisoned for 5 years for simply referring a 25-year-old adult to a Maryland doctor. This is not parental rights. 25-year-olds are not children. Next, Oklahoma Senate Bill 250. This bill tries to ban gender transition procedures for people of any age by banning any government funding of any form from going to medical providers who provide those services or are affiliated with such a provider. Any age. This is not about protecting children. This is about fear and panic. Meanwhile, in Texas, the Attorney General issued a memo stating that in his legal opinion, medical treatment of trans children could be considered child abuse under existing Texas law. The governor then ordered the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services to investigate parents of transgender children. If a set of parents, their child, and their doctor all agree that a nationally approved medical treatment is appropriate, the Texas executive branch wants to investigate and have their say too. That is not parental rights. This movement is showing their true beliefs. Please look. Thank you.
Good evening, Board of Education. My name is the Reverend Dr. Marlon, M-A-R-L-O-N, Tillman, T-I-L-G-H-M-A-N. I have a residence here in Harford County, and I am the pastor of Ames United Methodist Church, just a stone throws away. My grandchildren are 7 and 14 years of age, and when it comes to their education, it's priority one. Put your money where your mouth is what I always say when it comes to their education. When our county executive, who I have hopes in, said that democracy in action is what he saw today, I pray that you understand what democracy means. Because democracy, in its first definition, is a system of government by the whole population. When we talk about cutting budgets for our children, we need to push back, period. Because our children are the future, and that's why we're here. I believe that's why all of you took this position, is for our children. And so when I look at the blueprint for our students' future, there are 2 things I really need you to push back on that are dear to my heart: diversity and retention. I pray that you all really make a concerted effort at diversity and retention. I've seen how educators have been taken from this system by circumstances of which they were never given an exit interview as to why they were excused. We need to work on diversity intentionally and not have lip service. Second, there's also the portion about counselors and psychologists, as your statement says, that are there daily. Daily to me means they're there every day. At least that's how I define daily. But I've been told that counselors are moving around throughout the course of the day and you may not see a counselor in that school on a given day. If we're going to push back, our children are dealing with trauma. We need to make sure that there are counselors in the schools to deal with their situations and not arresting them for every little bit, every little thing. Now, I grew up in a generation where I know it doesn't look it, but when you got a little scuffle, you didn't get put in jail. You simply went to a counselor. You ironed it out, or if things were real bad, you had expelled for a little while and you came back, but you weren't given handcuffs. We need to push back on making sure that we put our money where our mouth is and make sure that our children receive the education that they deserve. And I believe that's why all of you ran. If you didn't, shame on you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Katie York, followed by Joe Rydell.
Good evening. Happy Lunar New Year, a little bit late. If I'd known there'd be such a crowd, I would have tried to write a better speech, but just wanted to kind of bring a couple points to your attention. Next month is Black History Month. To me, that is important that we recognize that in Harford County Public Schools, not just in February, but throughout the year. There's also been a lot of discussion about LGBTQ plus youth. To me, it is important that we are caring for all children equally, and we are affording our LGBTQ plus youth the same rights that all students have, that they're known by the names that they want to be called, they're known by the pronouns that affirm their gender identity, that they are respected, they are loved, they are safe from bullying and fear of retribution, just like the other students in the schools. I also appreciate you supporting the mental health policy, because kids' mental health is important. Oftentimes, adults have a tendency to think of children as they don't have real problems to worry about, just wait till they're an adult and then they'll really understand how tough it is out in the world, but kids struggle with a lot. And so I appreciate you acknowledging that. Additionally, I wanted to make sure that we're making a conscious effort to hire, retain, and promote instructors that are Black and other BIPOC individuals. Our students need to see themselves reflected, as previous person said, not just in the lower level staff, but in the people that are making the decisions. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Joe Rydell. I am the parent of 3 students in the district, 2 of which attend Bakerfield Elementary in Aberdeen, and 1 that attends Edgewood Middle. So first I want to start by just recognizing the good job that the staff at Bakerfield Elementary has been doing with our 2 youngest children. The staff there, both their teachers, the administrative staff, everybody down at the custodial and the food service staff have been wonderful since they've started this year. I did want to bring up one issue, which is of no fault of the staff there, which is why I started out by saying what a great job they're doing. Something I noticed recently is that there's no playground for the students above. I think there's one for like kindergarten, like for very small kids. There's a fenced-in area that we've started referring to as the prison yard, because it's essentially just a concrete slab and it looks like an old tennis court with no playground equipment. I was just wondering if maybe this, and I know funding is tight everywhere, but play is also very important for children, part of their development. So I just wondered if the board could maybe look into improving that aspect of their education. And then the other thing, so one of our children is also in the trans community. I also want to highlight the exceptional job that school staff, the respect that he has been shown by both his teachers, staff, and to be completely frank, the other students. There haven't been really any issues, and the only real place I've ever encountered an issue with this is outside of school, which is both a good and a bad thing. It's excellent because he's not facing it, because it's in school it's been great. I just usually when I come here, before when we lived in Cecil County, I came to these meetings and essentially just, I always remind people that Title IX is settled law with bathrooms, so that's kind of a moot point. I know that other elected officials have shown their tendency to waste our taxpayer money on lawsuits that are going nowhere, but I would hope that the school board in the future would continue the course of not following that example. Thank you.
Next, we have Apollo Hayden, followed by Aaron Hayden, and they have both identified that they are representing a group. So can you please give them 5 minutes?
Hi, I'm Apollo Hayden, and I'm going to speak on behalf of LGBTQ students in our school system. I am aware that there is a fear that we are harassing other children or just causing issues. I can tell you firsthand that we are not. Quite frankly, no one they couldn't care less that we attend school with them. Every high school student that I've ever met is simply just trying to pass high school and get out of there. They don't really care that we identify as something other than that they don't identify as. They don't care that I'm queer, that I'm non-binary. They would just like me as a person, and they like our other students as a person. And sure, we may not all agree on the same things, and maybe they don't agree with my identity, but we move past that. I don't berate them for that, and they don't berate me. Personally, I'm on my high school's wrestling team, and I can tell you that about 90% of my team are boys, and they don't care. There's a stereotype that they would care. They don't. I've changed in the same areas as them, just out of necessity. Other schools may not have provided an area for someone who would be considered a girl wrestler. If I can wrestle, they're fine with it. I can win points for my team and move on with life. They just want to be able to do well on the team. They don't care what I identify as because it doesn't affect them. That's a big portion, is that people think that who I love and who I identify as affects them. It doesn't really. I'm not walking around with a huge sign on my back saying that I love people similar to me. I just kind of also try to go about my day. I'm a senior. I just like to graduate. I really would like to go to college, so I'm excited to just get out of there. So I would just like to be able to have the rights while I'm still here and be able to access whatever I can in order to keep my education happy and prospering, and so I can just keep going and be able to get out of public school and into my future and hopefully do some change in the world in my future job. That's all. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Bolson, board. My name is Erin Hayden, and I am the parent of 4 children. 3 of them are Harford County Public School students. I have a degree in education and as well as family studies. I also facilitate support groups for both LGBTQ teens and their parents. What you hear about the LGBTQ community in this meetings from some people are absolutely false. Some are proven false scientifically, some are outright opinions, and some are just fake outrage about something that they can't understand. Please remember, just because you don't or can't understand something doesn't make it less true. At the last meeting, you heard some statistics about the LGBTQ youth community from a national youth survey. Recently, I surveyed LGBTQ teens in Harford County, and I want you to know exactly where this county stands. Of those who responded, 86.7% of LGBTQ teens in this community experienced symptoms of depression, and 92.2% experienced symptoms of anxiety. These statistics are higher than the national average. 80% considered suicide. The national average is 46%. This is horrifying, and this is why mental health in schools is critical. A student cannot learn if they are suicidal. That's Child Development 101. poor mental health can affect school attendance rates and also lead to poor physical health, which results in poor attendance. But if that isn't good enough, look at it this way. Test scores can't go up if children are physically and mentally unable to learn. After all, it appears that test scores, not the students, are of the utmost importance here. It was also said that the LGBT community was harassing students in school. Like you just heard, no examples were actually given. There is none. However, I have brought examples of how the LGBTQ students are being harassed. 53.3% experienced bullying and discrimination. Some of the examples provided to me were being made fun of for looking gay, being openly gay, being called slurs, being told they were delusional, and some children barked at. Our children are going to school to be harassed and barked at. What kind of environment is that? Luckily, 93.3% knew of at least one teacher who was an ally. Now, about the incident in Loudoun County. Let's get a couple things clear. That is the same one example that keeps being used, which means that these incidences are rare. Second, and most importantly, so please understand, that boy was a predator. The boy would have assaulted a girl at any chance he got. Instead of demonizing an entire group of people and victim shaming, why don't we simply teach our children not to assault and rape others? I feel that would be the more effective long-term solution. Nationally, 36% of transgender or non-binary students were sexually assaulted by straight kids in school, mostly where there were bathroom and locker room restrictions. 26% of these assaults were towards transgender boys. The only person to blame is the rapist, not the locker rooms. The solution isn't to deny students their rights. The solution is to have more supervision in the locker rooms, more privacy options, and an effective and consistent school response. This is why we have health class, to teach others about healthy relationships and consent. Our teachers are amazing. They work long hours, including hours after the school day. They're in charge of hundreds of humans, and they have to ensure that each individual one has their needs met. And now, they have to deal with parents who think they know better than them about education. Teachers are teaching facts in school using their best practices. They are not grooming children, and they definitely aren't predators. They don't care how students identify or what's in their pants. They just want them to have good mental health and that they are learning. I am, however, concerned about those who are more concerned about what's in these children's pants rather than their education. Please stop sexualizing and using these children as political pawns. Your personal beliefs should never come into play when looking at facts that are geared towards our children's educations and rights. Thank you.
Next, we have Ruth Oswald, followed by Vicki Jones. They would also get 5 minutes, please.
Hello, my name is Ruth Oswald. I'm new to Harford County, but in my former life, I was a teacher for 20 years, so I have educational experience. And I'm here tonight to speak in support of people in our LGBTQ communities and in the people in the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. And very relevant to the times we live in and some of the discussions that we've already had, I'm here to support the books and the classes that describe the lived experiences in these communities. I'd like to acknowledge the one lived experience that all parents share today, and that is how hard it is to be a parent in today's world. Our world is bombarded with new information by the minute, some of it conflicting with fact, some of it conflicting with our personal beliefs. Today's world looks nothing like the one we grew up in, our grandparents grew up in. Raising a child can be terrifying. How do we raise children to not only survive, but to thrive in this world that they grow in? That's all children. The only thing that's ever worked is to expose our children to as much of this information as we can through books, through ideas, through people, and in an environment where we can give it context. In today's classroom, where many children identify as LGBTQ and are part of, and many children are part of the Black, Indigenous, and people of color community, all our children will be surrounded by a beautiful diversity of races, sexual orientations, religions, and ideas. I'd like you to imagine a reading circle in kindergarten, one that I've actually seen, where the class is reading a book about summer vacation. Great way to start a topic or a discussion. And in the following follow-up discussion, Sarah, or the little girl, tells the class about the exciting trip she made to the beach with her two mommies. Matthew immediately raises his hand and says, "You can't have two mommies." Maybe that's not how Matthew lives. Sarah's head falls to her chest. She's ashamed and embarrassed because now everyone in the group knows that she's different. Now, a skillful teacher can redirect this discussion back to the topic, but my question is, should they? What an opportunity now exists to thoughtfully, contextually discuss the reality that some children do have two mommies or two daddies, and those parents really love their children. Suddenly, Sarah's head pops up with a smile, and Matthew says, "Oh, I didn't know that." And they go back to their discussion about summer vacation because it really didn't mean that much to Matthew. It's just something he didn't know. Well, who knows? We may have prevented a future bullying incident. Maybe Matthew now wants to read a book about kids who with two mommies or daddies to find out more about that, because now he wants to learn something he didn't know. And I hope, as we go forward, given the world that we live in, that he's able to find an age-appropriate book in either the school or the public library, and that book has not been banned. I just finished a really good book about the 1918 flu pandemic, and it had a very memorable and relevant quote that said, "We all live in an unwalled city." No matter how hard we try to protect our children by building walls, by banning books, or by going so far as to erase ideas, like viruses, they will infect them. Ideas will infect our children. And if nothing else, I can promise you children talk to each other. What they don't find in books, they'll find out from their friend. Again, we all live in an unwalled city. Whether our children survive or whether they thrive will depend on how well they are able to adapt to our diverse world. This world will never change for us. It never has in all of history. We're responsible for understanding and adapting to the changes that are occurring. And some of the best tools we have are in banned books. So I ask the school board and the community to please support all of our communities. Please don't ban their stories, and please don't ban their books. And if you think that's not happening, I don't know of any incidents yet that it's happening in Maryland or in Harford County, we can look to Florida, where recently an AP class in African American Studies was banned by the school board. It was a class that was needed for the students' SAT tests, everybody's SAT tests, so that they could pass. And the governor supported this move by saying, African American studies are not relevant to our education. I'm asking you that we never allow that attitude to come into Maryland, the Maryland education system. Thank you very much.
Good evening. As president of the Harford County NAACP, I wanted to share with you the NAACP's 4 areas of advocacy in education innovation. We believe that every child deserves an opportunity to reach their full potential, but our education systems are collapsing under inequity, and it's mostly because of poverty. Students who experience severe economic obstacles perform worse than students who have access to more wealth. To bridge these gaps and ensure that all children get a real chance at fulfilling education, we need to address systemic racism and poverty as a tangible barrier to learning and future achievement. Every student, every Black student, deserves access to great teaching, equitable resources, and a safe learning environment from grade school classrooms to college campus. Black students matter, and working on their behalf has never been more urgent. Here are our 4 areas of focus. Cradle to career supports. Students need family and community engagement and resources that encourage physical and mental health for their overall well-being, which allows for stronger academic development. College and workforce success. We support students getting the education and skills development they need so they can be successful on the job or in an academic environment. College costs should be affordable. Decreasing the overall cost of college is an economic imperative. Racial justice in education. We need strategies and investments that build accountability to advance the success of children of color. Black children deserve to experience culturally relevant, student-centered learning. We work to expand policies and interventions that equip families and communities to better support their kids' needs in school. An end to the police school-to-prison pipeline. Police officers don't make schools safer, but police presence in schools does increase the likelihood that Black students will be introduced to the legal system and then remain in it. In 43 states and the District of Columbia, Black students are more likely to be arrested than other students while at school, while other students may do something similar and not be punished at all. Such an experience often ends with devastating effects to the child and their life path. I ask the board to start having these discussions and really take the time to understand how to address some of these barriers. Look closely at the areas of the county where there is a need to address equity. First, take time to understand what equity really means. I ask the board not to make assumptions, or for those of you who are not of color, to apply your life experiences, but seek to instead have conversations with people who don't look like you. I ask the board to keep asking questions and to work hand in glove with the community to make sure all of our children are set up for success. Thank you.
Next, we have Alyssa Ersham, followed by Mary Jane Price. Mary Jane will receive 5 minutes.
Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to address you tonight. I'm Alyssa Ursum. I live in Fallston. I have a daughter in 9th grade at Harford Grace High School in the ITOA Magnet program. I was an educator in Baltimore County Public Schools for 11 years, blessed to be home with our 2 daughters for 11 years, and now I work at Harford Community College as a grant coordinator. In Mindful of Race by Ruth King, the author shares a story, The Untold. It's a story she offers that white people might consider telling their children or adapting to their experience. And I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, as I decided last night to address you, so I'd like to share an excerpt from that letter that I wrote 4 years ago to my daughters, who were 16 and 11 years old at the time. It's about race, whiteness, our family history as Americans, and our place in it. My children, I'd like to tell you from my lips the truth about our racial history, about whiteness, and about being a member of the white tribe. Years ago, our ancestors did a horrific deed against the human race. They enslaved Black people and treated them with utter disrespect. Beatings, rape, torture, lynching, and ongoing terror. Their children were sold to the highest bidders and owned as possessions. We relied on them to grow our food, take care of our children. Your ancestors, yes, our tribe did this, white people. I have shared with you that my great-grandparents on both sides came from Ireland. I grew up with strong Irish pride, knowing my ancestors fled from a bad situation, knowing my ancestors suffered and overcame oppression. What I didn't learn was the true history of how the Irish became white, about how my own ancestors became the oppressors and were part of a collective who achieved acceptance by proving they could be even more brutal in their oppression of African Americans. Have you ever seen a friend or a classmate pick on or make fun of a weaker or less popular person to get accepted by the stronger or cooler kids? This is what grown-ups did and are still doing to each other. While our family may not have been in this country during enslavement, the color of our skin meant that we benefited from the system set up at the very beginning of our nation and used it to our advantage. There is much to be done. There is no time for guilt or shame, only time to work to repair the damage that has been done and still exists. I know that by acknowledging the horrendous things that happened in our country's past, we must learn and grow from our errors to correct this wrong. We need to become advocates for all of humanity, especially Black and brown people, but also for anyone marginalized by
by systemic racism. Sunny Aya said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. As a collective, we must look at the facts as they are and teach them to our children so that they can do better than we have, be better than we are, and make the world better as a result. Every child deserves to feel safe, welcome, and affirmed in Harford County Public Schools, no matter their race, religion, income, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability. No one has the right to impose their own personal bias or religious beliefs on anyone. Harford County Public Schools is a public school system." Thank you.
Magical age where my glasses come off and they come on, and they come off and they come on. Good evening. My name is Mary Jane Price. Can you hear me? Okay. As a veteran educator, I've attended and participated in many school board meetings, over the years, but this is my first one here. So I come to learn. So I have a few questions that I'm not looking for an answer tonight, but I'm just trying to learn about how things work in the county. I'm lucky to work with many young people here in this county in various capacities, and so here are some things I hope to learn tonight and going forward. If county government were to prioritize the importance of our schools when considering a budget, which is something that was touched on by Mr. Castley today, but if they had to prioritize, especially now that he indicates some things are going to be tighter, where would the schools stand when the tough decisions are going to have to be made? Let's say on a scale of 1 to 5, where do the public schools, where does the spending for the schools go? So just something I'm going to be watching and trying to understand. Next, what's the board's commitment to ensuring that all students, regardless of any differences in heritage, abilities, beliefs, etc., are treated with equal respect, consideration, funding, materials? How and to what extent? And how is that measured? Something else I'm going to be learning about. What are the responsibilities that you feel you have as the board and for our schools to teach all the history of this country to all of our students? A hot topic for sure. Are adequate funds made available? My master's is in curriculum and instruction, so this one is really at the top of my list, I guess. Are adequate funds made available to keep textbooks and other materials current and relevant? Some textbooks I know where I used to teach, by omission or by plan, excluded huge parts of the history of this country and of the world. And let's face it, money is money, and textbooks and materials are not inexpensive. So, and the last one, how does this board balance your commitment to academics and pedagogy with what I have seen to be dissenting voices in the community? That's got to be a tough balance, and I'm going to be interested to see how that works out. So thank you very much. That's all I needed to, and I'm just going to keep seeing you and learning. Thank you.
Next, we have Emma Peller, followed by William Martino.
Good evening, board, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'd like to start by saying that equity is defined by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary as justice according to natural law or right, specifically freedom from bias or favoritism. This differs from equality in a key way. Equality means everyone gets the same, while equity means they get what they need to be successful. Is that not what the students of HCPS deserve? Freedom from bias and the tools they need to succeed. In practice, this means a few things for HCPS. It means selecting a new reading curriculum that is scientifically aligned. This helps students fulfill their right to be able to read. And since we had a brief budget discussion this evening, I will also add that other counties have shown that switching to these curriculums has shown wide savings across the board. Equity also means that we teach the real history of this country, including how it contributes to ongoing barriers for people of color, even when that history is uncomfortable or unpopular.
The bottom line is this: if we cannot acknowledge the barriers and privileges that exist in our system, we cannot hope to create a better system that is equitable for all our students. Thank you.
Good evening. I was frustrated with the presentation and follow-on vote for the revision to student attendance at the previous Board of Education meeting. The presenter classified the old rule of being chronically absent of 6 days and 11 days as arbitrary and advocated for the 10% rule of 9 and 18-day absences. Well, the 10% rule is also arbitrary. There's nothing scientific or empirical about this rule. So you replace an arbitrary rule with an arbitrary rule that lowered the standards. This seems to be the trend these days in the public schools, is lowering the standards and thus the quality of education. Is Harford County trying to compete with Baltimore City? Fox 45 News reported that the graduating senior with a 0.13 GPA that only passed 3 courses finished in the top half of their graduating class, mainly due because of not showing up for classes. Nice. The new state policy desires to equalize excused absences of mental health issues to physical health issues. Several board members advocated for the parents to be notified if their child interfaced with a counselor about their mental health, just like the parent is notified about a physical health problem. If they are equivalent, why aren't the parents notified in both cases? This seems contradictory. During the presentation, Mr. Hennigan stated that counselors are not trained therapists, and this was more of a check-in to see how they are doing. Then later he stated that they are therapists and they are going to do what they're going to do. This was very convoluted. The board rejected a motion to table this issue and carefully get the language right. The board rejected every effort for defending parental involvement in this process, most especially the president. The same president who gave a campaign promise to work with parents and respect their rights. So much for political promises. This is another effort to hide things from the parents. It seems to boil down to whether parents are raising the children or is the state responsible for raising the children? Most of us parents believe it is our job. This board seems to believe the state controls the children. This belief is rooted in Marxism. Harford County Public Schools need to support policies that advocate for parental rights and protect us from the overreach of the state. Thank you and good night.
Next we have Douglas Rudd, followed by Loretta Halstead.
Good evening, Dr. Bolson, Board of Education members. I'd like to speak with you tonight about cell phone policies in Harford County Public Schools. I have serious concerns as a staff member of a school that we are compromising many things, one being student safety during the day. We have many students who are using their cell phones to make plans to do things with other students that are not in the best interest of our school system, and it is a concern. I would urge you to speak with administration from any given school in the county and get their opinion about what is happening because of cell phones, the traffic in our hallways, the meeting up in the bathrooms, the endless display of TikTok videos that are being filmed inside the school, the cyberbullying that takes place because of students being able to carry their cell phones around. These are all concerns that we have, to say nothing of the concerns regarding academic integrity. We have students that are taking pictures of exam questions, sending it to their friends. Doesn't matter whether it's an A-day, B-day format in a high school situation or a middle school situation. Cell phones are very quick and easy to use. Students are often better at it than all of us in the room as adults. and they can do things very quickly and disseminate information in a way that we can't really comprehend how quickly it spreads. So my concern overall is that we review that policy, you speak with teachers and administrators about what is happening in their building, and consider what we need to do for academic integrity, safety and security of our students, and to limit the ability to be disruptive to the educational process that goes on during the day. I urge you at any point to come into our buildings, walk around, see the number of students that walk out into the hallway and the first thing they do is get their phone. And it really doesn't matter who it is on the other end of that phone. It's disruptive and it's costing them learning time in the classroom. Thank you for your time.
Is there a Loretta Halstead? Okay, we will move on. I have Susie Scott followed by Christina Lenosha. Susie Scott would get 5 minutes, please.
Good evening. As the Board of Education presents its budget recommendations to the county executive and the county council, I'd just like to make a few observations. The demands on the taxpayer are great, and the returns we are seeing are few. This school system is failing. Your own achievement scores demonstrate this. The agenda for tonight's meeting has listed a couple of presentations that should be of interest to the parents and taxpayers of Harford County. One of these presentations will come from our Supervisor of Equity and Cultural Proficiency. Why are we forcing teachers and students to accept the ludicrous idea that they are guilty of prejudice just because of their skin color? Research has already shown that diversity training programs have failed to improve attitudes and behaviors for years, and attempts to reduce bias have been a bust. Anthropology Now reports that hundreds of studies dating back to the 1930s suggest that anti-bias training doesn't reduce bias. More recent studies reviewing hundreds of surveys by bias training participants finds, quote, weak immediate effects on unconscious bias and weaker effects on implicit bias. Consultants Rick Kirkland and Iris Bonet of McKinsey & Company wrote that after reviewing diversity research from all over the world, they did, quote, they did not find a single study that found that diversity training in fact leads to more diversity. Still, school districts across the country are conducting diversity, inclusion, and equity training and instruction, often mandatory, and yet the federal reporting tells us that racial problems in schools remain, quote, astronomical. A study of chief diversity officers in K-12 public schools conducted by J.P. Green and John D. Paul in October of 2021 found that in K-12 public schools with chief diversity officers, the achievement gap widened rather than narrowed. This type of fact-based research helps to expose the falsity of this DEI paradigm. Yet billions of dollars of public and private money is being invested in these boondoggles. Anti-racist literature and equity projects want us to see racism in everything. If we accept that the astronomical numbers of the feds that they're reporting are authentic, given the prevalence of these programs over the last many years, one would be permitted to question these programs' value. Yet many well-meaning Americans instinctively embrace the ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion because these concepts, in their original meaning, are central to the American ethos. The notion that all men are created equal is the most profound commitment to diversity and inclusion any nation has ever made. But the fact is, each of these words has been distorted to mean the very opposite of their original intention. Many of the practices and principles of DEI violate the Constitution and the Civil Rights Act. We cannot be forced to accept the flawed assumptions being presented in these DEI programs. Flawed assumptions lead to false solutions. The end result of the DEI worldview is that America itself is fundamentally flawed,
hopelessly unfixable, and must be radically transformed. This is a long-held Marxist goal, and it must be rejected if we are going to save our American experiment. Thank you.
Yes, we do need God back in our schools. Psalm 141, 3 through 5. Take control of what I say, O Lord, and guard my lips. Don't let me drift toward evil or take part in acts of wickedness. Don't let me share in the delicacies of those who do wrong. Let the godly strike me. It will be a kindness. If they correct me, it is soothing medicine. Don't let me refuse it, but I pray constantly against the wicked and their deeds. And I do pray for you and for all of us, that we listen to the urgings of the Spirit, staying close to him through prayer and his word, so we have clarity in what he wants us to do. Right now, Harford County Public Schools are allowing our children access to graphic artist renditions of pornography. Harford County Public Schools are allowing our children to read books which have sexually explicit scenes and themes. Harford County Public Schools are teaching our children they cannot believe their own eyes and ears in determining what gender person they're conversing with. All of these evil doings are the sole responsibility of the people in charge of determining our classroom curriculum and materials. We implore that you protect the innocence of our children and remove these materials and teachings from our schools. In fact, Harford County schools should not be focused on anything other than reading, writing, and math, at least until we can get a passing grade as far as academic proficiency. Right now, reading and math are at best around 50% proficiency. Our children are being graduated despite that and going to college only to have to take remedial math and English classes. What positive steps are being taken to change the direction of these dismal scores? Do you have an interest in helping our children to be academically successful? Or is sexualizing our children and lying to them about their biological gender your main priority? Exposing children to sex normalizes sex to them, thereby putting them at risk of being sexually abused. Telling a girl that if she thinks she's a boy, then she is a boy is promoting a delusion and skewing that child's sense of reality. If I told a friend that I was the Queen of England and that person thought I was serious about this belief, I would be considered to be delusional. A friend would not tell me, oh, okay, if that's what you believe, then that's true. We love our children enough to tell them the truth. In addition, telling a child he's a different gender than the one assigned at birth starts the ball rolling with thoughts and plans of gender reassignment surgeries, another dangerous spot to be putting our kids in. These surgeries are harmful and scarring physically, psychologically, and emotionally, and they cause irreversible harm. Again, I implore you to protect and save all our children from these evils. Psalm 143, 8 through 11. Let me hear of your unfailing love each morning, for I am trusting you. Show me where to walk, for I give myself to you. Rescue me from my enemies, Lord. I run to you to hide me. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. May your gracious spirit lead me forward on a firm footing. For the glory of your name, O Lord, preserve my life. Because of your faithfulness, bring me out of this distress. May God bless and guide you all.
Next, we have Dr. Jasmine Blanks-Jones, followed by Tracy Waite. Is there a Dr. Jasmine Blanks-Jones? Okay. Is there a Tracy Waite?
Hello, my name is Tracy Waite, and I'm a resident of Bel Air, Maryland, and a proud parent of a daughter who graduated from Bel Air High School. And I'm going to thank all of you for listening to all of our comments, including my own. I'll keep this brief. I just wanted to say that I wanted to really applaud Apollo Hayden for her comments earlier. She's, I think, the youngest speaker that we've had so far today. And, you know, I just think that it's really remarkable that a person who is 17 years old can have the courage, you know, to be true to who she is, that she can be honest, that she can be open and speak so candidly. At her age, I think that's really remarkable. I know how hard it is for teens to be different. I can remember when I was a teenager, I think we can all remember how awkward you feel. And thanks to, our students like Apollo, who is a role model for all of us in learning that, we are all different, and we all have to learn self-acceptance and to be true to ourselves. So she is a role model in that way. And I think that having students like that is really a credit to herself and to her parents and to our schools and to our teachers. It takes a community, to support her and all of our students. So thank you so much.
Next, we have Jean Salvatore, followed by Christy Larkin. Is there a Jean Salvatore? Okay, thank you. How about a Christy Larkin?
Good evening. I am a mother of 5 children who all go to the North Harford schools. 2 of them are trans. There has been a lot of anti-trans and anti-LGBTQIA+ rhetoric recently, so I'm here to speak in support of LGBTQIA+ kids in our schools. All of the childhood, medical, and psychological experts agree that supporting and affirming LGBTQIA+ youth is best practice. I hope that our board and school system keeps policies in place that do just that, and if any changes are made, it's only to further support them. Trans kids, LGBTQIA+ kids, aren't harming others in school by living their authentic lives. They're not bullying other kids. The opposite is actually true. Trans kids, LGBTQIA+ kids, are very often bullied by others. This is the case for both of my trans kids. One of my kids has even been physically assaulted in school. I can tell you, as the mom of 2 trans kids, that teachers and school have nothing to do with my kids' identities. My kids came to their own conclusions outside of school without ever having even heard about being trans in school. So what some say about teachers turning kids trans isn't true at all. I am truly grateful for my kids' teachers, who have all been very supportive and affirming of them. I feel like parts of our community have gotten themselves worked up about the wrong things. Instead of worrying about a trans student minding their own business, using a bathroom, I think we should be concerned with what kind of environment encourages kids to become bullies and allows them to display that harmful behavior. I haven't heard of one single trans kid in our school system harming another student, while bullying is a pervasive problem in every single school in this county, and despite a no-tolerance policy, bullying continues. LGBTQIA+ students having rights and protections isn't what's causing low test scores or why we can't recruit quality teachers. I hope the board keeps this all in mind when making decisions this year. Trans rights are human rights. Thank you.
Vice President Sewell, that's all the in-person speakers this evening.
Great, thank you. Thank you for everyone speaking tonight. Okay, Ms. Jillian Lader, would you begin the virtual public comment?
Yes, Vice President Sewell. Good evening. You are now in the Board of Education meeting. Before you begin your public comment, please state your first and last name. Your time will conclude in 3 minutes. You will hear a bell ring when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please introduce yourself and you may begin your public comment now.
Jill Ferrara. Our life is shaped by our mind, and we become what we think. The First Lady of Florida, Casey DeSantis, has recognized this and is rejecting stigma-laden terms like mental health and replacing it with resiliency. In October, the First Lady proposed her Resiliency Education Initiative with unanimous approval of the State Board of Education. As stated by the First Lady, this approach to mental health will help students to better withstand the challenges of what life will inevitably throw their direction while teaching students how to overcome and persevere. No one is immune from hardship. It's how you learn to navigate and overcome that counts, and celebrating the success in doing so. Through this initiative, schools throughout Florida are implementing curriculum that will promote characteristics such as critical thinking and problem solving, responsibility, celebrating and overcoming adversity and grit, mentorship and volunteerism, respect, coping skills, gratitude, empathy, citizenship, hope, honesty, and physical activity. I urge HCPS to follow Florida's example and propose initiatives that empower students to strive for greatness while also providing the skills to overcome adversities. This will not only benefit students during their academic career, but will follow them well after graduation, making them successful leaders. The launch of the middle school sports program is a great start. It was heartwarming to hear of the camaraderie and sense of community this program has brought in a time where it is much needed. I encourage you to be creative with the budget to capitalize on that momentum and put forth more programs that will build upon resilience for the well-being of students. To find out more about the Resilience Education Initiative, visit the Florida Department of Education's website at fldoe.org, as well as Governor Ron DeSantis' website at flgov.com. I can personally say how grateful I am for the strong leadership by Governor and First Lady DeSantis that empowers parents, supports teachers, while protecting students. Thank you, and have a good night.
Good evening. You are now in the Board of Education meeting. Before you begin your public comment, please state your first and last name. Your time will conclude in 3 minutes. You will hear a bell ring when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please introduce yourself and you may begin your public comment now.
Good evening. I am Crystal Dawn Parks. Wow. Look at the heart of Harford before you. I hope you have listened to the testimony of diversity and love that took the time to come out for all of our children. Educators are always capturing teachable moments. At the budget session last week, you opened a conversation with those citizens attending, a town hall approach to fill the hour of time. We need more of that from you. One of our most involved parents, who I don't always agree with on all views, but I deeply respect his critical thinking and attention to detail, found common ground in a discussion just a few minutes with Dr. Bolson about early education, special education, job security, and raises for Harford County Public School educators and staff. Critical thinking and common ground are exactly what our students should be taught, as well as our community. Breaking news for some of you. Yes, I tend to align to the left, but I also support parental rights. I left the classroom as an educator to advocate for special education and other marginalized groups in the educational setting. It was the focus of my graduate degree and decades of professional achievement. Harford County Public Schools does need to review some policies and make some personnel changes that violate parental rights and safeguards. There are some bad apples. At the same time, parents must be open to understanding the professional best practices that are in place to protect our most vulnerable. It is a shared responsibility to educate our children. Another parent recently, a very involved and passionate mother as well, championed parental rights, but then went on to point out that she endorsed the juvenile justice reforms that included a parent and child's right to have parents and an attorney present before a minor could be questioned by police. I was perplexed. We're concerned about counselors and therapists talking to our kids, but we're against a law, juvenile justice reform, that allows police officers to interrogate your children while they're in handcuffs? Now, not all of us are as involved in reading the actual documents and bills, we're paying attention to what somebody gives lip service to. None of us can be so caught up in catchphrases and left versus right politics that we stop being critical thinkers and seeking common ground.
You have
Our
reached the
kids need
3-minute mark. Thank you. Vice President Sewell, that concludes our virtual public comment for the evening.
Great. So again, want to thank everyone who attended in person and also virtually to provide us their comments tonight.